I'm standing in my loungewear in the middle of a party that's in full swing, nervously scanning the crowd for my wife. Just 15 minutes ago, I was at home, in the kitchen, finishing up dinner for myself and the kids. That's when my phone rang. Brian's voice came through the line, sharp and tense. He's never one to overreact, so the way he hesitated before speaking made my stomach drop. Jordan, I'm at the party and I don't know how to say this, but you need to come here. Now, Lindy's with someone. It doesn't look good. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My fork clattered onto the counter, and I barely heard it. My first instinct was to deny it, to tell him he must be mistaken. Lindy, my wife, she couldn't. But Brian wouldn't call me over something like this unless he was sure. And now here I am, weaving through the crowd, each step heavier than the last. Music pounds against my chest, and the air smells of alcohol, cheap perfume, and something faintly floral that reminds me of her. The way she dabbed lavender oil on her wrists before bed. My stomach churns, and I feel out of place in every possible way. I see flashes of Lindy in my mind. Her laugh, her quick wit, the way she looks at me when she's feeling playful. And I can't shake the gnawing question. What if Brian's right? A girl bumps into me, spilling her drink on my arm. "Oh my God, sorry," she exclaims, but I barely acknowledge her. My focus is locked, my chest tightening as I scan the sea of faces for Lindy. For my wife. The party feels alive in a way that's alien to me. People laughing, shouting, oblivious to the war inside me. Every second stretches unbearably long. And then, just as I start to think Brian might have overreacted, I see her. My breath catches. She's there, across the room. And she's not alone. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Jordan, and my wife, Lindy, is the kind of woman who lights up a room just by walking into it. She's magnetic, with a smile that can charm anyone and a way of making people feel like they're the center of her world. It's what drew me to her all those years ago, back when we were just kids working part-time jobs in the same strip mall. I remember the first time I asked her out. Sweaty palms, a half-baked plan, and a borrowed car with a broken heater. She laughed when I stumbled over my words and said yes, just like that, as if she was doing me a favor. From that moment I was hooked. The thing about Lindy is, she's not just magnetic, she's complicated. One moment, she's this warm, loving mother who kisses scraped knees and sings our kids to sleep. The next, she's restless, needing more than what this life can give her. She loves deeply but never quietly, and being with her feels like holding on to something constantly moving, always just out of reach. Our marriage has been a mix of things, beautiful moments like the day our first child was born, or the nights we stayed up laughing over nothing until our sides hurt. But there's also been tension. Some of it's my fault. I work long hours, sometimes too long. I think part of me is trying to prove something to her, or maybe to myself, that I'm enough, that I can give her the life her family never thought I could. And her family, God, her father made it clear from day one that he thought Lindy was settling for less when she chose me. He's the kind of man who judges your worth by the size of your paycheck, and I didn't exactly impress him back then. I had ambition but not much else, a fact he reminded her of constantly. Why not go back to Ben, he'd say. He has his life together, a good job, a future. Ben, her ex, her best friend. I told myself I could live with it when she first mentioned it, that I was secure enough in our marriage to handle their friendship. But every time I saw them together, every time she laughed a little too hard at one of his jokes or leaned on him for advice, it felt like swallowing glass. We fought about it more times than I can count. I told her it wasn't about trust, it was about respect, about boundaries. But she'd always say the same thing. Ben's just a friend, Jordan. You're being ridiculous. And maybe I was, or maybe I wasn't. Lindy had this restless energy about her. She'd get bored of routines quickly, which meant I always had to keep up. If I let things slip, forgot a date night or stayed late at work one too many times, She'd drift. Not completely, but enough to feel the distance between us like a cold wind. And then there were her friendships. Most of them didn't bother me, but Ben. He was different. He wasn't just a part of her past. He was a part of her now, and I hated it. There was one night, a year or two ago, that still sticks in my mind. We were at a dinner party and Ben was there as always. I'd stepped out to take a call for work, and when I came back, I saw them standing in the kitchen together, laughing. She had that sparkle in her eyes, the one she used to have for me. I didn't say anything then, but I brought it up later, after the kids were asleep. Turned into a fight like it always did. She called me insecure, and I told her she wasn't being fair. You wouldn't be okay if my ex was this involved in my life, I said. She rolled her eyes, like I was being petty, and went to bed without another word. I never brought it up again after that. I didn't want to sound like the jealous husband, the one who smothers his wife because of his own insecurities. But every time Ben showed up, it was there. The doubt, the ache, the quiet question I was too afraid to ask. Is there still something there? I thought I'd buried those feelings, told myself I was overreacting. But now, as I stand here at this party, searching for her, I know I've been lying to myself. It started like any other Saturday. Lindy was restless all morning, pacing the kitchen with her coffee while the kids sat on the floor drawing. I noticed her glancing at her phone every few minutes, her thumb hovering over the screen like she was typing something but kept thinking better of it. I didn't need to ask. I already knew what was on her mind. Jordan, she started, her tone cautious, like she was testing the waters. About the party tonight. I sighed before she could even finish. Lindy, we've talked about this. It's just one night, she said, her voice soft but persistent. I've barely gone out in months. I need this. The thing is, I didn't want her to go. Not because I didn't trust her, or at least that's what I told myself, but because the idea of her being there, at Ben's house, surrounded by his friends, tied my stomach into knots. I hated the thought of her stepping back into his world, even for a few hours. We have 2 kids, Lindy, I said, keeping my voice calm. I need this, I need that, it's always about what you need. What about them? What about us? Her shoulders slumped slightly, but the look in her eyes didn't waver. She was determined. It's not like I'm going out every weekend, she said, a tinge of frustration creeping into her voice. I love our family. I love being a mom. But I need to feel like myself again, Jordan. Just for one night. Is that so much to ask? She pressed her hands together, tilting her head the way she always did when she wanted something. It was hard to argue when she looked at me like that. So earnest, so sure she wasn't doing anything wrong. I hesitated, weighing my options. I could say no again, but we'd just go in circles like we had all week. And deep down, I knew she'd made up her mind long before she asked. Fine, I said finally, the words bitter on my tongue. Go. I trust you. It wasn't entirely true, but it felt like the right thing to say. She broke into a smile, relief washing over her face. Thank you, she said, wrapping her arms around me. I hugged her back, but my grip was loose, hesitant. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a mistake. The rest of the day passed in a blur. She spent hours getting ready, curling her hair, picking out a dress, fussing over which shoes to wear. I stayed in the living room with the kids, pretending to help them with a puzzle but mostly trying to keep my mind off what was coming. She looked stunning when she finally came downstairs, her blue dress clinging in all the right places, her makeup perfect but understated, the kind of effort she rarely made these days. You look nice, I said, trying to sound casual. Her smile was faint, almost apologetic. I won't be late, she said, kissing me lightly on the cheek before grabbing her coat, and then she was gone. As the evening wore on, I tried to focus on the kids, feeding them, getting them ready for bed, but my mind kept drifting back to her. We'd been texting back and forth, but her replies were short, vague. Me, everything okay? Her, yeah, just busy. I'll check in later. I wanted to believe her, but the knot in my stomach tightened with every passing hour. Twice, I thought about calling my parents to come over so I could drive to the party, just to see for myself. But they were abroad, and there was no way I was going to call Lindy's parents. Not after the years of tension between us. So I stayed home, pacing the kitchen, waiting for something to distract me. That's when my phone rang. Brian's name flashed on the screen. I answered quickly, almost grateful for the distraction. But the moment he spoke, my heart sank. Jordan, I don't know how to say this, but you need to get here. Now. I hung up the phone, my hand trembling as I set it down on the counter. The kids were sitting on the couch in the living room, watching TV, oblivious to the storm that was brewing inside me. I couldn't bring myself to call Lindy. Not yet. Brian's words echoed in my head. Lindy's with someone. It doesn't look good. I tried to focus on the routine. Clean up the dishes. Check on the kids. Stay calm. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. What did he mean by it doesn't look good? Was it something innocent, blown out of proportion? Or was it exactly what I feared? A betrayal I couldn't ignore? I glanced at the clock. It was nearly 9 p.m., the kids' bedtime. I tucked them in as best as I could, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. Emil, my oldest, noticed. Dad? Are you okay? He asked, his small hand tugging at my sleeve. Of course, buddy, I said, forcing a smile. Just a little tired. He didn't seem convinced, but he nodded and climbed under the covers. When they were finally asleep, I grabbed my coat and keys, pausing only to check my reflection in the hallway mirror. My face looked pale, drawn. I barely recognized myself. As I stepped out into the cold night, I thought about turning back. I wanted to convince myself that Brian was wrong, that Lindy would never cross that line. But I couldn't ignore the pit in my stomach, that nagging voice whispering, what if she already has? The drive to the party felt like it took hours. I kept replaying the last few months in my head, searching for clues I might have missed. The way Lindy had been pulling away, the late nights working overtime, the way her phone was always just out of reach when I walked into the room. I had dismissed those things, chalked them up to stress or routine. But now, every detail felt like a flashing warning sign I'd been too blind to see. When I finally pulled up a block away from the party, I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I didn't want to go inside. I didn't want to see her with him. But I had to know. The house was alive with music and chatter, light spilling out onto the front lawn. I slipped through the side gate, avoiding the main entrance. The backyard was packed. People laughing, drinking, lost in their own conversations. And then I saw Brian. He was standing near the edge of the patio, his hands shoved into his coat pockets. His face lit up with relief when he spotted me. But there was something in his eyes, hesitation, guilt, that made my stomach churn. Where is she? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He gestured toward the far corner of the yard, where a small group had gathered around a fire pit. She's over there, he said. With Ben. Of course it was Ben. I should have known the moment she begged to come to this party. It had always been about him. I stayed hidden, watching from the shadows. Lindy was sitting close to him, her legs crossed toward his, her body language too casual to be innocent. She was laughing, that full, genuine laugh that had once been reserved for me. And Ben, he leaned in just slightly, his hand resting on the back of her chair, like he'd done it 100 times before, like he belonged there. I felt my chest tighten, the heat rising in my face. For a moment, I thought about storming over, making a scene, dragging her out of there. But then something stopped me. What would that accomplish? Instead, I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture. Just one. Proof of what I'd seen. Proof I wouldn't need to explain. My hands were shaking as I slipped back through the side gate, the music fading behind me. I didn't look back. By the time I got home, the house felt colder than it had when I left. The kids were fast asleep, their soft breathing coming from their rooms, and the sound made me pause in the hallway. For a second, I stood there, listening, letting the stillness seep into my bones. Then it hit me like a freight train. She's with him right now. The realization shattered whatever composure I had left. My pulse thundered in my ears as I stalked into the bedroom. Everywhere I looked, I saw her. Her robe draped over the chair, her perfume bottle on the dresser, the blanket she loved to curl up with. Everything about this room was hers, as if I were just a guest. And then I spotted the big plastic garbage bin I'd brought in from the garage earlier in the day, intending to sort through old junk. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed her things in armfuls, the dresses she wore to work, the ones I'd bought for her on anniversaries, her shoes stacked neatly in the corner. Without thinking, I tossed them into the bin. Her perfume, the scarves she never wore, even her books. I grabbed them all and hurled them in like they were debris. I should have stopped, should have taken a breath and thought it through. But no, this is what she deserved. Let her pick through it later. Let her take whatever she wants. I yanked open her nightstand drawer, tossing makeup and jewelry in handfuls, her favorite necklace clinking against the plastic. I grabbed her framed picture of us on our wedding day and tossed that in too. The glass cracked on impact, and the sound was strangely satisfying. Her phone charger, her planner.
Her hjembag.
All of it went in. My mind was a whirlwind of rage and clarity, of past and present colliding. How much did I let slide? How many times did I convince myself that things would get better? I thought of the arguments about Ben, the dinners she'd skipped, the way she pulled back every time I reached out. I thought of her family's constant judgment, her father's smug little comments about how I'd never measure up. Through it all, I held on. For her, for the kids, for the hope that maybe people could change. But I'd been wrong, terribly wrong. People don't change. They just find better ways to hide who they really are. As I grabbed the last of her things from the closet, I felt something deep inside me harden. A vow I whispered to myself. Never again. Never again will I ignore the truth because I'm too scared to face it. Never again will I let empty words blind me to the facts right in front of me. The bin was nearly full by the time I heard the front door open. Jordan. Lindy's voice echoed through the hallway. I didn't answer. I stayed in the bedroom, glaring down at the mess I'd made. A few seconds later, she appeared in the doorway, her coat still on, her cheeks flushed from the cold, or maybe from the alcohol she'd had at the party. She froze, her eyes darting from me to the garbage bin. "What the hell are you doing?" she asked, her voice rising. "Why are you throwing my stuff in the trash? Are you nuts?" I looked her in the eye, feeling a calm I didn't expect. "I know everything." For a moment, her face went pale. It was quick, just a flicker. But I saw it. The panic. The guilt. She recovered fast, though, straightening her posture and crossing her arms. "What do you know?" she snapped. "You're exaggerating again. You always do this. What's wrong with you? Have you been spying on me?" Her words came fast, sharp, and cutting, but I saw through them. She was pushing, trying to make me doubt myself. "You've been sneaking around with him," I said, my voice steady. "You begged me to go to that party, and the first thing you did was go to him." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't back down. "We were just talking, that's all. Are you seriously throwing my stuff away because of a conversation?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Don't play dumb, Lindy. I saw you. I saw the way you looked at him. The way he touched you. That wasn't a conversation. That was betrayal." Her face flushed red, a mix of anger and embarrassment. "You're out of your mind. You're blowing this way out of proportion. You're paranoid, Jordan. Always have been." She took a step closer, her voice softening like she thought she could reel me back in. "You know I love you. You know I'd never do anything to hurt you. You're just overthinking this." But her words didn't touch me, not anymore. I'd heard them all before. You can gaslight me all you want, I said, cutting her off. But I know the truth. And this, I gestured to the bin. This is what happens when you treat your marriage like a joke. I'm done. She stared at me, speechless for the first time all night. Her panic flickered for a moment, then disappeared behind defiance. Fine. You want to throw me out? Do it. I won't beg. Grabbing the bin, I hauled it toward the door while she trailed behind, spitting insults. You're ruining our family, Jordan. Think about the kids. I stopped and turned, my voice sharp. I am thinking about them. They deserve better than this. When I shoved the bin onto the porch, she stared at me, stunned. Her tears barely held back. You're throwing everything away, she hissed.
No, Lindy.
I'm finally seeing everything clearly, I said before closing the door in her face. As silence settled over the house, I checked on the kids. They were sound asleep, peaceful and untouched by the chaos. Standing there, I vowed to protect them and rebuild our life, even if it meant starting over without her. I woke up on the couch, the cold morning light spilling through the blinds. My head throbbed, and for a moment, I forgot everything that had happened. Then I saw the garbage bin outside through the window, her belongings still piled high. I hadn't slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed our argument, her voice in my head accusing me, twisting the knife deeper. The house was quiet, too quiet. Usually, Lindy would already be up, bustling around with the kids, filling the kitchen with noise. But now it was just me. The kids woke up not long after, Emil rubbing his eyes as he shuffled into the living room. "Where's Mom?" he asked, his voice still thick with sleep. I froze, the weight of the question crashing down on me. "She went out for a bit," I said, my voice betraying the lie. "She'll be back soon." He nodded, too young to see through me, and I felt a pang of guilt. Whatever happened next, I had to protect them from the mess Lindy and I had made. Lindy showed up around noon. She hadn't even taken her things from the porch. Her makeup was smudged, and her hair looked like she'd spent the night in her car. She didn't knock. She just opened the door and walked in like nothing had happened. I was at the dining table, pretending to review bills, when she stopped in front of me. "We need to talk," she said, her voice subdued but still laced with defiance. I stood, folding my arms. "Talk? About what? You made it pretty clear last night where we stand." She sighed, her shoulders slumping. For the first time, she looked small, like the fight had been drained out of her. "Jordan, I didn't do anything with Ben. I swear. I know it looked bad, but you've got this all wrong." I shook my head. "It's not just about last night. It's everything, Lindy. All the times I told you how I felt about him. All the nights you brushed me off. The way you always put him above us, above me. It doesn't matter if something physical happened. You've been crossing the line for years, and I can't live like this anymore." Her eyes filled with tears. "So that's it? You're just giving up on us? On our family?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to believe her, to go back to the life we'd built. But the larger part of me, the part that had been pushed aside too many times, knew the truth. "I'm not the one who gave up," I said quietly. "You did. Every time you chose him over me, you gave up. And now, I'm just finishing it." We sat in silence for a long time. She tried to argue, to reason, but her words sounded hollow. She even apologized, though it felt forced, like something she thought I needed to hear. In the end, I told her to leave. "I'm not stopping you from seeing the kids," I said. "But you can't stay here. Not anymore." She looked like she wanted to fight, to push back. But she didn't. Maybe she knew she'd already lost. She gathered the bin of her belongings and left without another word. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, awkward conversations, and quiet nights. Lindy moved into her parents' house, a fact that felt both ironic and fitting. Her father had finally gotten his wish. She wasn't with me anymore. The kids took the news hard, especially Emil. He asked every night if Mom was coming back, and I had to find new ways to tell him no. Clara, my youngest, didn't understand at all. She just wanted things to go back to normal. But there was no normal anymore. I focused on rebuilding a routine that didn't include Lindy. It wasn't easy. The house felt emptier without her, but in some ways it felt lighter too. One night, Brian came over. He'd been checking in more often lately, probably out of guilt for being the one to tell me the truth. "You holding up?" he asked, cracking open a beer as we sat on the porch. "Barely," I admitted. "But I'll get there." Brian looked at me for a moment, then said, "You did the right thing, you know? I don't think she ever realized how good she had it with you." I shrugged, not ready to accept that yet. "Maybe, but it doesn't matter now." We sat in silence for a while after that, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. 2 weeks later, Lindy called me. "I made a mistake," she said. "I've been thinking about everything, and I know I messed up. I want to fix this, Jordan. For us. For the kids." Her voice sounded genuine, and for a moment, I hesitated. But then I remembered all the years of dismissals, the excuses, the constant erosion of trust. "I'm sorry, Lindy," I said, "but I can't do this again. We're done." Her silence on the other end was deafening. The divorce was finalized a few months later. I got the house and primary custody of the kids. Lindy was granted visitation rights, but she didn't show up much in the beginning. I think she was embarrassed, or maybe she just didn't want to face me. I started to rebuild my life piece by piece. I reconnected with old friends, spent more time with the kids, and even found moments to just breathe. One evening, I stood in the backyard with Emil and Clara, watching them chase each other under the fading sunlight. I thought about the life we used to have, the mistakes I'd made, the love I'd lost. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel weighed down by it.